I'm
Good
Holly
morning.
Ittel, the exhibitions director and Quilt National director here at the Dairy Barn Arts Center. I wanted to apologize first. I just got back from urgent care. I'm going to be on antibiotics, so I might not be quite as chatty today. And the photos that I'm using are not the best ones that I have because I didn't have access to my hard drive, which is at my office because I wasn't planning to work from home today. But we do have photos of the artwork. The details might just not be as beautiful. So I just wanted to say that and apologize first to the artists. And I hope they are okay for viewing in this purpose. But we're going to start with the artists. You can please introduce yourself in alphabetical order, and then we'll get started. And let me screen share. Sorry, one moment. Oh, does my screen look strange to you?
I just got a
Presenter window. Oh,
center window with it.
now it looks right.
Okay. Carol, hi.
Larson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Isn't Natalya before me?
Oh,
She's-
well,
she's
we're
okay.
not. We're not going in alphabetical order, I guess.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'm on Carol Larson, Petaluma, California, which is 35 miles north of San Francisco. I
Oh, sorry.
wrote down a lot of stuff to say, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Are you ready?
No, we'll introduce the other three and then we'll come
Okay.
back to you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, that's funny. My brain obviously is somewhere else today. Jane, good morning. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jane Lloyd, and I live at the moment in Northern Ireland, 30 miles north of Belfast. I was born in Dublin in the south of Ireland.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Natalya.
Hi, I'm Natalya Khorover. I live just outside of New York City, about a 45-minute drive in a pleasant village called Pleasantville.
Perfect. Good morning, Naomi.
Good morning. I'm Naomi Velasquez, and I live in Pocatello, Idaho. So in the West, we are very smoky right now from all the fires. So I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Oop, sorry. Carol, this isn't in alphabetical order, but maybe we should start in alphabetical order.
It's up to you.
Well, we'll go with the slideshow so I don't
Okay.
get too confused.
Okay. This work is called Somebody's Child 2. And the artist statement on it was, or is, as George Floyd was being asphyxiated by a white cop in Minneapolis in May 2020, he was heard to cry out for his mama. His call for his mama resonated with mothers everywhere. I Googled Black lives taken by police and found an open source database started by a former California newspaper editor. For the past 20 years, he and others have recorded names and circumstances of over 28,000 people of all nationalities who had fatal encounters with police just in this century. He also verified the deaths with links to press coverage for each one. The database is a wealth of information and tragedy. From this spreadsheet, I culled the names of over 4,700 African Americans who died of gunshots or asphyxiation from police encounters. All of these folks had mamas. All were somebody's child. For this work, I digitally printed the 4,700 plus names onto silk organza, stitching together to make 3 layers. The hand-stitched tear droplets accent the tragedy of these killings. When installed in front of a light source, the names are visible, yet not entirely legible, which was my intention. My general artist statement is as follows. I am a storyteller. I layer text onto cloth with digital technology, paint, and thread to create narratives on social, cultural, political, historical issues, including but not limited to women's issues, sexual assault, aging, dementia, social justice, racism, gun violence, and climate change. Much of my current work is further inspired by outrage. My intention with this work is to provoke others to consider their own point of view and to engage conversation. For example, from this work in Quilt National, many people have told me what a sad story it is, or how they never thought before about how many Black people have been killed by police in this country. Further, others, especially people of color, have asked me, what is my motivation as a white woman to create work about Black lives? Quite simply, my motivation, again, is to spark conversation. White people need to wake up other white people about how Black people are singled out in this country to be harassed and or killed by police officers, most frequently with no accountability or punishment to the officers. Just because it does not happen to us gives us no excuse to look the other way, or that horrible excuse most often uttered that the mistreatment of Black people has gone on since slavery. This does not make it right. How would you feel if it was your son or your sister being slaughtered, just living their life? Silence implies complicity, and I will not be silent. My attraction to fiber began at age 10 when I learned to sew my own clothes. As an exceptionally tall girl, I was unable to find pants long enough to fit my growing body. The colors and textures of the cloth drew me in even more. I loved making garments that did not look like everyone else. Sewing led me through decades of hand weaving, knitting, wearable art, into quilting. While I managed a medical practice by day, I was weaving and sewing at night and on weekends. I begged off wearing a white uniform so I could wear art to work every day. I retired at 50 and took a quilting class, making one traditional quilt, and then took a variety of workshops. I took 8 workshops in 2 years, learning new techniques, thus distilling these ideas to find my own voice. I used to dye a lot of fabric, as my website name denotes, which is Live to Dye. But California's long history of drought put that to an end a few years ago. Hand dyeing uses a lot of water, and we don't have any to spare. So instead of using dye, I now layer text, digitally printed or screen printed, embellishing with images, clothing, ephemera, and stitch relevant to the story, all of which add color, pattern, and interest to the cloth surface. The challenge that drives my work comes from figuring out how to best convey my message. Hours of research, drafting, sketching, contemplation, and fermentation comprise my design process. Often I just park the idea in the back of my mind and ruminate it until I'm ready to begin. Once I start construction, the work generally goes together quite quickly, except of course in this case. I debated quite a bit as to whether this should be 2D or 3D. Eventually, I decided to let the cloth do what it wanted to do, and this was the result. Kevin Lunny asked me on Facebook about the in-between space where my work completely changed direction. Was it 9/11? Was it Black Lives Matter? COVID? When did I make this transition to art that says something? I responded that it was the Tall Girl series, which was an autographical body of work I designed between 2005 and 2009. It was both a healing project and a transformative one, in which I started making work that told a story. Before that, I had been making what I call pretty quilts, abstract work, much of which sold to art consultants and corporate executives for public spaces, because it was not only beautiful, but message neutral. When I started that series, I had no idea how my work would evolve. Lacking drawing skills, I stumbled through the designs, and the heart-wrenching details, which I believe transformed my work. After that series, I was drawn more and more to storytelling work. And now I believe these narratives are what make my work stand out in a room full of pretty quilts. Ironically, a lot of abstract pretty quilts are inspired by deep and dark subjects. It's just not so much in your face. What I'm working on now, I've just finished, but need to photograph a second piece about hypocrisy of those in the Christian right who worship on Sunday and make mayhem on Monday. The first piece was juried into a show in Highland Park, Illinois, titled Words Matter. What's also fermenting is new work on climate change, both 2D and 3D pieces. I save folders of ideas for new work, both hard copy and on the hard drive. I get all these emails about, climate change and all this, and I don't read anything all the way through. I'm such a visual learner. So I just bookmark everything, that I want to go back to, and who knows if I ever will. Anyway, it seems many current events continue to aggravate me. My husband of 50 years thinks I should go back to making pretty quilts while I'm fired up all the time about contemporary issues. He was an angry young man while I was a Pollyanna. Somewhere along those years, we traded places. I'm not exactly angry, but I'm frustrated by so many issues for which I feel I personally have no way to express my feelings other than through visual art. So I've become an artivist. I love what I'm doing now. Just the research and figuring out how to best communicate my idea keeps my brain young. And so now I have a little PowerPoint about my studio. Let's see if I can figure out here. You've disabled, okay, is that I need you to enable screen share. Okay. So I put some little snippets of details of my current work on the left side to show that I actually do make work that has color in it. And ironically, so many of them are the same color family as my image there. And the reason this image is the way it is I did make a piece, the last piece, or one of the last pieces of my Defining Moments series was about being a storyteller. And so I had this headshot of myself, which I printed up and then sliced into pieces like a puzzle. And when I was playing around with it, I distorted the color in Photoshop, but I kind of like it, so I just kept that. So when we bought our house 47 years ago, we were newlyweds with no children. So I immediately took over it's a 3-bedroom house. So I took over one of the bedrooms as a sewing studio. And my husband built everything. He built everything in. His father was a carpenter by profession. He was a firefighter, and he loved to build things, and he inherited all these tools. So he took the closet apart and made it floor to ceiling, and built space for 3 sewing machines. And on the top of this closet, you can see I have my, the Tall Girl series is stored up there. And over the years, this is just, it's been my go-to place for storage places. And then on the door of the closet, he made a hinge with a table that drops down, which has my sewing machine that I'm currently using. This machine is a Pfaff. I call it the fussy Pfaff. And the closet is an old Janome and also a serger that threads itself. And so initially this was my sewing room, and then I became a weaver, and I had a floor loom in here. And so all these cubbies on the wall held yarn, and now they hold fabric and books and movies. He built me this nifty thread rack. On my design wall, which is 8 feet long, are some pieces I'm working with, recycled, those quilted plastic food bags. And then underneath the design table, I have some IKEA cabinets, which mostly hold commercial fabrics. And on the wall are mostly hand dyes, mine and batiks and others that I've bought. And on the top row, he made this great freestanding shelf that runs the two sides of the room. And it's mostly has some shaker baskets and things. Of course, they all contain something. Like this big one, this picnic basket is full of yarn remnants from knitting socks and things. And then we had one daughter who, when she went to college, I took over her room as my office. And I also had in here a futon sofa, which about 3 or 4 years ago, I really wanted to get a sit down mid arm because I was starting to make bigger work and it was killing my shoulders to run it through my FOF. So I wanted to get a mid arm, but I had this stupid futon sofa in there. Well, I realized that nobody ever came to stay. So let's get rid of that. And we got a sleeper sofa in another room. So I was able to get this 6-foot table and get a Juki in there. So this is where I'm sitting now. And this is the Juki's on the wall behind me, or I mean, on the table behind me. And then he also built this, he did build-ins for her closet of drawers. So I have, all the business of art storage in there. And then on the other side of the closet, I have some quilts. So he built everything but the Juki table. And then, and usually enough, we have a full basement under a house, which is unusual in California, but our house is on a hill, so we have a basement. So the previous owners had made this into a big party room, and they had this fancy kitchen, and I took it over. My daughter took it over in high school, developing her own film. And then after I learned surface design, I took it over, and my husband took the desk from my old office and turned it upside down and made a print table out of it. He built in this closet, he built this 3-foot tall Lazy Susan, which holds heavier paints and chemicals, things I use in my work. I have an old blender down here. I have a electric fry pan for melting soy wax, and 2 fans and masks and gloves and all the tools. So it's a great workspace. And a couple of years ago, we put in a new sink because between the photochemicals and the dye chemicals, we had totally trashed the original sink, and it no longer would drain, and it was just a mess. So we had that changed. And then I have another part of the basement where I shoot my work. He built these shelves that hold mostly vintage linens, which can become an occupation in itself, just picking up vintage linens. And then this is his workspace, which is, I always say it's a fire hazard shop because, he's a retired fireman, but, he's got some wood here and lots of tools, and you can see the dust on the tools. And he's taught me how to use some of the tools so that I can, cut slats for my work and, just do the basics that I need to do. He now is in his 9th year of Parkinson's. So, he's basically forbidden from using his workshop. So this is, when we bought the house, this is what sold him on the house, was this space for his woodworking. And let's see here. Yeah, so I guess the only other thing I had to say is because my husband does have Parkinson's, I spend a lot of energy worrying about what part of the house I'm going to have to give up if we ever have to hire a caregiver. And I've pretty much decided I'll surrender the living room because we never entertain anymore anyway. So, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Carol. I appreciate it. Let's see, Jane, would you like to speak?
Yes. The quilt I have in Quilt National is the 3rd collage quilt that I have done. And before that, I used to make spiral quilts. But I do this day journal every day, sticking magazine bits in making pleasant pictures. And I thought I had all these books with interesting things in them, and I would make use of them and make them into something. So I enlarged the piece on Photoshop, and then I printed the background And then I tried using some different methods, different ways of stitching and putting the pieces down.
Mm.
And I came up with this pattern and I blew it up on Photoshop and I started collaging it. And then I sewed, it's stuck to canvas, and then I sewed through that. So I think I need one of your Dukey machines, Carol, because I think that would have gone through the fabric much better. Do you think so? She's not there.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think I'll get a Dukey. So I had great fun in doing it, and I think this is the way to go now to do collage quilts, because I've all this information and all these patterns and ideas in these books, which I make about 2 or 3 a year. So I've plenty of ideas to put in them. And at the moment, what I'm doing is something similar with pieces like this. And I seem to be on a colorway of, I seem to be stuck in this colorway, but I'm going to add more colors over them and sewing pieces over pieces, layering and layering. But the one in Quilt National has a lot of paper in it. And this is stuck down with gel medium and sewn over. So I definitely think I'll have to get this Dukey. Because it was very tough sewing the whole thing together when I had the pieces made. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Could we see your, could you hold up your example of your book again for a little longer? Let me
Oh,
stop.
yeah. Sometimes I do machine stitching on it, like that.
Have you ever exhibited these books? Where they,
No,
do you see them as sketches or just a daily practice, or?
it's a daily practice which helps me to create and to get balance and to use shapes in a different way than I would normally.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have titles. They have titles recently, but there's stitching on them sometimes. And then you can play about with them, because you can go back to old ones and take pictures of certain bits of it and blow it up and do something different with it. But I love doing it, and collage has been really the making of me through COVID. I've just collaged and collaged and collaged, and it's just I love it, and I look forward to doing one every day.
So when you process it through Photoshop and then print it, what are you printing? What kind of fabric are you printing it on?
Cotton, just the cotton you buy, the printed, for printing. The printing cotton, and it's A4, so you have to do, you have to either use that shape or add it to another shape, or
Mhm. So have
So
you
it's
made
what-
many quilts from the collage?
this is
book?
my third one. I've only made 3, but I used to make spiral quilts, and then I thought, gosh, I have all these ideas here which can be, blown up or taken pictures of again and collaged again. So it's endless possibilities. I've hundreds of these books with these, it's interesting to look back. I always date them as well to see what I did a year ago or what I did 2 years ago. And it's just amazing what you see and how you look at them differently when you see them in a year's time,
Yeah, and what's interesting about your Quilt National 21 quilt is looking through your book, I can tell that you're using a lot of fashion magazines because you see the models really quickly.
Yeah.
And
I love
in your
faces and shapes of
Yeah.
people.
and in this quilt, it doesn't hit you as fast that there's a repeated face looking back at you. you kind of have to find it at first. At least that's how I see it. Oop, did we lose connection? Can everyone still see and hear me? Okay, so I think
Yes.
we must have lost Jane's connection. Okay, well, we'll move forward. Natalya, would you like to speak?
Sure.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so I will start with the statement for my piece, which is called Urban Dreams. Okay, inherent dignity, human family, conscience of mankind, highest aspiration, rule of law, human person, universal respect, and fundamental freedoms. Those are the snippets from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adapted by the United Nations on December 10th, 1948. Thanks to the pandemic, 2020 has made the lack of progress glaring. We must remain vigilant and make dramatic leaps towards addressing systemic racism, intertwined with climate change reality, to get closer to the world that can be achieved if human rights are at the forefront of our conscience. Urban Dreams attempts to raise public awareness about the materialism, consumerism that has contributed to the world's environmental and human rights issues. This piece is created mostly from, well, actually it's completely created from single-use plastic, as most of my creations are these days. I found some old CD towers. I don't know if anybody remembers having CDs. I used to have my CD collection in these CD towers, which I still have a couple of pieces left. I tried giving them away. Nobody wanted them. So as things go, I decided to figure out how to use it in an artwork. And I have been working towards making 3D artworks for a while now. So I decided to use the to cover the towers with plastic. I usually stitch on plastic and make it into flat artwork, you know, plastic shopping bags, plastic netting. And in this case, I made casings for the towers onto which I stitched fire escapes. Fire escapes are a recurring theme in all of my artwork. And then I attached letters to those casings. The letters I cut off from single-use plastic as well, and just rearrange them into my own sort of, it's my own take on graffiti and the ransom letters that were made famous in the movies of the 1930s or 40s. So my graffiti is sort of a combination of those. And the graffiti that I constructed for Urban Dreams are all snippets from the Declaration of Human Rights, which I thought was appropriate to the time that this was all happening. I created this piece during all the protests that took place during the pandemic. Although I have been creating artwork from single-use plastic for many years now, I have usually refrained from making political statements, mostly because I'm a quiet person. I don't like to be out front and center. I'm a behind the scenes activist, so to speak. But I think the pandemic has made me bolder, or perhaps age has made me bolder. So I speak up a little more often now, especially on the climate change issues and how much single-use plastic exacerbates those climate change issues. So I thought I would read to you a little bit of my artist statement. So I am an artist who has been using repurposed materials for nearly 20 years. I have figured out how to best utilize such things by trial and error and by practicing every day. My collectors are creative souls who are concerned for the health of our planet and love art created from unusual materials, and who are inspired when they see beauty created from the challenge of making art from repurposed materials. My students are creative souls who are concerned about the environment and want to explore using repurposed materials for their artwork. I belong to the tribe which wants to be creatively involved in stopping the pollution of our environment. When I create art, I draw my inspiration from the urban environment as well as nature. I strive to use materials which would be condemned to the landfill and choose to use stitching and sewing techniques to bring my art to life. I'd like to encourage exploration, inspire confidence, and fully share my extensive experience using these repurposed materials. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint presentation, but I do have a few slides from my studio that I'd love to share. Let's see if I can. Share screen. There we go. So luckily enough, these photos were taken while I was creating this artwork. So here's my work table with me holding the pieces of Urban Dreams. So my studio is a former garage. Here's my thread wall. That's the most colorful wall in my studio. I don't buy new fabrics, but I am very tempted by the various threads that are out there. And I I usually just buy what appeals to me in the thread texture or color, because then when I'm working on a project, I can just look at my wall and pull out what I need. And plus to this wall, I also have boxes of embroidery thread. This is me at my sewing machine. I have several machines. They're all Berninas. This Bernina is an industrial Bernina. And she is my workhorse, and I tend to use her more than any other machines. The other two machines are domestic Berninas that have been mine and my mother's for 30 or 40 years or something like that. I don't use any specialized stitches on my machine. I just use free motion thread painting and straight stitch. That's pretty much all I do. Occasionally a zigzag. What you see on the side here, these little cubbies are from IKEA, and they collect my thread snippings. So as I'm stitching along, I just, I snip off my threads and I stuff them in there. In this picture, they kind of look like they're color coordinated, but they're really not. Whatever I'm stuffing, I keep stuffing each drawer until I fill it, and then I'll either empty it to use it in another artwork or empty it into something, into some other container. Here's another view of my machine. And here's another view. So on the wall next to me is my ever evolving vision board that I make for myself. I rip out photographs that I see in magazines that inspire me in some way. And this board has actually quite a few layers. I just keep pinning things on and on. Occasionally I will remove things that I find no longer speak to me, but usually I just keep pinning things on. And this is me simulating pinning onto my wall. And as you see, I have things that are coming off the wall too, because I just keep going. Here's the other direction of my studio. Like I said, it's a former garage. So what you see back here, that window used to be a garage door, and there's a door behind me as well. And this is my work table where everything happens from little to small, from creating artworks to taking pictures of artworks, the smaller ones that is, to teaching. And behind me is all sorts of cubbies and things that contain my multitude of materials. That basket is full of edges cut off from larger artworks. that I keep to make the little cards that I'm making on the table in this photograph, actually. I just make little abstract compositions with them. When I'm in between projects or when I am sort of stuck as to where to go next on a particular artwork, I'll take the time and make a few abstract compositions, kind of freeze my head. This is me next to my design wall, and behind me is this the mannequin, which is a remnant of my past life as a fashion designer and a costume designer in another lifetime. My hands, this is my grandmother's thimble. I have about 3 or 4 of them, and they fit my hands perfectly. So it's my constant companion whenever I'm doing any hand stitching. So I'm going to stop sharing. So as far as projects that I'm working on right now, what you see behind me, that mass of flowers, is my latest Artivist project. I was invited to participate in an outdoor sculpture installation up at the Tilly Foster Farm Museum, which is about a half an hour north of where I live. It's a functioning farm museum and restaurant and everything. And the group I belong to has outdoor sculptures there every year. Last year, I was given a tree into which I hung birds that I made out of single-use plastic. This year, I I went a little bit more ambitious than normal. I wanted to create a greenhouse that was filled with flowers, which were made out of single-use plastic. And I wanted to really make it an overflowing greenhouse full of these flowers. So I decided to crowdsource this. I asked people to help me out in creating these flowers, and I never expected the response that I would receive. All I asked for is for people to, cut up some plastic and cut it into some petals and send me some petals that I could arrange into flowers. Well, at this point, over 50 people have gone way beyond the call of duty and have sent me envelopes and boxes, not only of petals, but of fully formed flowers, which I have been now wiring onto branches. I have actually stopped making the flowers myself because I get so many gorgeous, beautiful flowers sent to me, and it's all I can do is just to keep up and making them into branches and into arrangements. And that installation, if you'd like to participate, there's still time. I'm installing this on August 29th, and I will be sharing that everywhere on social media then. But that is what is all consuming my summer.
Wow. That's really wonderful. And 50 people. So have those 50 people been from just in the States or international?
International. I've gotten a package as far away as London, England, several packages from Canada, and all over the States.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Would you mind in the chat box typing in where we can find more information about this project?
Yes, so that would be on my website, and I will type that in. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Actually, I'll just post the link. That's what I'll do.
Hi, Naomi. Would you like to speak?
Yes, Holly. I'm so sorry you're feeling bad today. We're happy to be here. I'm honored to chat with you guys today. Actually, mostly not guys. Happy to chat with y'all today. I'm from the great state of Texas. I ended up in Idaho about 9 years ago this fall. Natalya's work is the one I'm most familiar with, and it's so excited to get to hear about it in person. So if you don't follow her on Instagram, I'm just going to throw that out there that she tells us all sorts of cool stuff on Instagram all the time. And I love watching artists process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about process today, because that's what I like to hear about. And I do love to see studios. So I'll try to show you some of my studio here today. I kind of have 2 roles in life in addition to all the normal things, but I am a professor at Idaho State University, which is how I ended up in Idaho. And so I have a very, very greedy day job, which includes being an artist. And so I get credit in a sense for applying to exhibitions and being included in projects, which is, it kind of makes me feel better when I feel guilty about being in my studio. I know that it's actually part of my job. In order to teach students, I need to be continuing as a practicing artist myself, which I would do no matter what, because it keeps me sane. So I think many of us experienced that during the pandemic, that this process was really helped by being able to make creative work. And some people were really stymied and didn't feel like making anything. And I get that too. But for me, I certainly had busy hands during the pandemic. So I want to screen share just some samples, because my piece is three-dimensional in a different way than Natalya's. So I'm just going to try to share my document camera if I can. Let's see if I can do that. I'm going to just share my desktop, and then just bear with me here while I pull up my document camera. Can you guys kind of see those images there? Okay, great. So the piece that's in Quilt National is a piece that's constructed with dyed batting. It's cotton batting. And I like to kind of show these. I know you probably didn't get to touch it in the gallery, so you're just gonna have to pretend like I let you touch my samples, because wherever I travel, I always take samples with me. I came upon this process in graduate school, and I started dyeing cotton batting because I wanted to talk about the things that we hide, the things that we share, the things that we conceal. I was going through a divorce at the time, and I think I was thinking a lot about relationships and broken relationships, and it appealed to me to talk about these hidden moments and how you reconstruct your life. So this is kind of a pile of dyed batting, and I can't stop touching it. And then once I dyed the batting for Blood Knot, I constructed it into really large sheet quilts that I machine quilted on my grandmother's Bernina. And I actually used 2 layers of the batting inside. And then once I'm done with that, then I cut up the pieces pretty obsessively and then glued them to the back substrate quilt. So in order to make the image look like I want it to look, which is it changes as you walk past it, it changes in different light, it changes in different settings, which I think is telling about relationships and life and how we're constantly being asked to adapt to change. I tried sewing it, and I tried all sorts of things, and it ended up that adhesives were my best friend. So I start off by treating the back quilts with matte medium and fabric paint, and then I apply glue with a paintbrush to all the individual pieces and kind of place them down and then let it dry. So like every other textile process, a very painstaking experience. So these samples are kind of in bad shape because I don't take care of them and I touch them all the time. But you can see that I did some samples. These are specifically for Blood Knot. And you can't really see the difference, but I really wanted it to be the right pink. And I think you guys can maybe appreciate that. I think a lot of artists are here today, but I really needed it to be just this certain particular pink for the thing I was trying to portray. And so I used a couple of different colors of Procyon MX dyes to dye these, and kind of came up with the right color scheme. I talked about it in my artist talk video online, but I always try to overestimate how much material I need. And for some reason on this project, I think I went a little higher on how I cut my pieces organically, and I almost ran out of dyed batting, which if you've ever dyed anything, you know that if I try to dye it again, there's no way that I was going to get the same color again. And then it was just going to be this like slice of pink that was not the right tone at the end of it. So I got very much all the way to the end, and I only had this many pieces left. Like I've literally never cut it that close. I was gonna have to chop the whole thing off and reconsider my composition because I make the composition on the back first before I start gluing. So it was a little nerve-wracking for this particular piece. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of stressed me out at the end of this piece. What I was trying to communicate in this piece, I remarried a wonderful man, and I have 3 stepkids and now a grandkid. And this piece was about more positive things in a relationship. And this one specifically is about the blood knot and talking about the intertwining of people and how you become all tangled up and complicated and twisted together, and what that looks like in your life when you're all twisted in with someone and everything is complicated and involved, but also stronger, I think, with the 2 chords or pieces together, as in a knot diagram. So I've certainly used knot diagrams in my work. I get inspiration from a lot of places, but you can kind of see the detail image here. I have left pieces exposed for the negative space for the actual blood knot imagery on this piece. And then it's a sea of those pink dyed pieces. Okay, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of that if anyone's interested. I do actually think this is a little bittersweet. When I made this piece, I decided it would be the last one in this series. I've been making them for about 11 or 12 years, and I think that I'm done right now with this series. So it is a little weird to be talking about it when I kind of feel like I've put this one to bed a little bit. I might come back to it another day, and I certainly have my tubs of dyed batting here in the studio, but right now with the work that I'm doing at school, I think this work is a little slow. Certainly they take a lot of hours and I enjoy it, but I'm interested in some work that's a little faster, that's fiber work. So I'm gonna grab the piece I'm working on right now real fast. So this piece, and I could screen share again, but I think you can get enough information from the screen. So this piece is stitched. I just finished stitching the top by hand, and it's laid on top of a digitally printed fabric. This piece is more about my relationship to the environment and sustainability. So I'm thinking about, this is an image from a satellite about deforestation. So there are all these color images of the areas where we've lost all the trees, and I'm trying to essentially mend or patch those areas by putting the green back in. So I'm sharing this piece because I like to talk about the fact that this one isn't resolved yet, and I'm not sure how it's going to get resolved. And I think it's good to hear that sometimes as another artist, to talk about, like, is this working? Is it not? Do I share this publicly? But I do love seeing process, and I love to see people's work as it goes. I'll show the document image there. So you can kind of see the pink hiding that I'm trying to cover up or patch or mend with this kind of like sashiko stitching. So I hand dyed these batiks with a little bit of Kathy York's help. She's always my batik go-to person. She's another very talented quilter. And then I hand dyed the thread that I just finished stitching these down. They're misty fused, these pieces onto the backing fabric. So my next decision is whether I keep going with the process I was deciding to do, or whether I need to cut this up further. So I'm kind of in a little bit of a thinking moment this week about how I decide to go forward with this piece. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. And then I'm just going to show you one other thing I'm working on. And I think this is maybe helpful to some people as well. I did know that in the pandemic, this last spring semester was going to be incredibly tragic for creative time. And so I decided to do a 100-day project because I really didn't want to feel cheated out of being able to do work and work in my studio and have everything be about administration. I'm the chair of our department, so there's a lot of emails, that take up a giant portion of my day. When I retire, I'm not going to answer any more emails. I'm just letting everyone know now. That's my line. I'm just never going to answer email again ever in my life. So I spent a lot of time doing that. So I decided that some stitched collages would help me kind of get through the pandemic and get through that semester. And I actually think it was a really good choice. These are not important conceptual work, but they kept me happy They kept me grounded. I felt like I was constantly getting to work on something that was interesting. This is a little origami bird, and I made a hand cut stamp and some other hand cut stamps. And I love making artist books as well. And then I stitched some little rainbows on top. So I think that this project really helped keep me grounded. And I would encourage people that are struggling to consider maybe not every work has to be earth shattering, and it's okay to just keep making. So I love that Jane shared her sketchbooks today. And I love the social justice work that Carol and Natalya are doing. But I think sometimes it's okay to just make things that make you feel like you're a creative person again. And so I thought that that would be something that maybe might help someone feel more positive today. So that's what I have to share, Holly.
Thanks so much. And I definitely relate to that just in my personal practice of being creative in other ways and making that be okay. I'm gonna place a spotlight view on all of us so we can get back in conversation. Jane, I saw your back. Hi.
Yep.
And spotlight. Good. Hi. And I also think that's a good segue, Naomi, because I wanted to ask Natalya, could you talk about what you've learned from working with single-use plastic as a artist, as a artistic material?
What I have learned from it. Well, I learned that I don't have to go buy fabrics. I have nothing against fabrics. I love fabrics, especially vintage fabrics. But the material is out there, and it's free. And what better way to utilize it but by making something beautiful or thoughtful from it, instead of letting it, be in the landfill, or like we do in this county here, goes to the incinerator and releases chemicals into the air. So yeah, it stitches quite easily, very similar to fabric. And there's so much of it out there. So
Good. And Jane, I want to pick up kind of where we left off talking to you. Could you tell us a little bit more about the materials in your 3 quilts that you've made from your scrapbooks?
Well, I used to go, before COVID, I used to go to Nepal twice a year to work with disadvantaged women. But also I brought back loads of fabric because it was so cheap. I had suitcases full of them. And if anybody came with me, I filled up their suitcases as well. So I use Nepali fabric, which is lovely and dense cotton. And then I collected all similar colored magazines and used them too, and applied them with matte medium to the canvas backing.
Okay, nice.
Stitched over them.
Do you well, that's okay. I was just curious if you had any like scraps, or could you show those the sketches that you had when you blew it up again?
The sketches like that.
Yeah, is that that's for the Quilt National 21 piece, correct?
Yeah, that's Quilt National 21. I don't know what I filmed with the other ones.
I
And
can pull
then
up the photo.
this is the ones I'm working on at the moment. And it's a printed backing. This is canvas, and I stitched through just with the printed piece onto the canvas, and then layer pieces on top. So you can add many layers, and if you don't like it, you just add another layer on top, and it becomes quite stiff, a piece of fabric. But this one I haven't I've only just started, and I haven't added paper yet. but it gets quite, I like the feel of it, you know, when it is put together, all the different layers on top. And sometimes I use zigzag stitches, and other times I use straight stitches. And changing the color of your threads makes all the difference.
It's quite the palette, that piece. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So Carol,
Yes.
I wrote down some notes. I like the question that you said your friend posed about what made you change direction in your art.
Mhm.
And could you talk a bit more about that? And I'm curious if any of the other three could talk about if there has been a shift for you. Naomi, you talked a bit about like going through a divorce when you were younger, etc. I'm just curious.
Yeah, my Tall Girl series was an autobiographical series about cosmetic surgery that was done at my mother's request on my body when I was 17 years old. I was shortened 6 inches, and I had been forbidden by my father from ever talking about it. He said he would disinherit me if I talked about it. And by the time I reached my 50s, I was fortunate to retire at 50 when my boss died of brain cancer. And so when I was in my mid 50s and really enjoying my life, making art and traveling, I started having a lot of orthopedic problems as a result of this long-term damage to my body. And I just felt like I needed to talk about it, but I didn't know, I really didn't know how to do it because I didn't want to upset my father. And it, you know, the whole thing was just so verboten. So at that time, I had just finished a year of studying with Jane Dunwall doing surface design on fabric. So I started writing the stories in Word, and then I changed the font so it was cryptic, so you couldn't read what it said, but I knew what it said. And then I printed it to the cloth. And my father was still alive, but he had vascular dementia. He was starting to lose it. But my mother was gone. And he said to me, "Oh, I wish your mother was alive to see what you're making. This cloth is so beautiful." And I thought to myself, if you only knew what it said. So I wrote like 20,000 words. And so at that point, I decided to self-publish a book about it. And then I thought, well, I need to have illustration for the book. So I decided to make quilts to illustrate the book. And so the whole thing became a process of healing, and I think really transformation for my work, because interestingly enough, I had befriended Marion Coleman like 2 years before. We both went to our first SACWA regional meeting, and I saw at that meeting this woman knew how to get things done. And so like the second or third conversation I had with her, I said, you know, I'm going to do this autobiographical body of work, but I feel like I need somebody to prod me, and would you mentor me in this project? And so she did. And she, you know, our first meeting, we sat down and developed a business plan for it. And, you know, I wrote out a whole, you know, spreadsheet about different stories I wanted to tell and all this. And so long story short, I published the book. And then I started curating the exhibit, and it's had 4 or 5 exhibits. It's had 2 special exhibits at, you know, the big Mancuso shows, and then it's been in 2 university galleries. And then I was offered last minute, somebody canceled, lucky me, and I got a solo at the National Quilt Museum in Kentucky. I think that was in 2018. Anyway, so that whole process, it was so healing for me to do the work. And then when it went out in the world, all these people are emailing me and saying, wow, I saw this and it reminds me, you know, this happened to me in my life. And, you know, I wish I could do something with it. And so the whole, it was just like, it was like the frosting on the cake to get to read people's reactions to me telling my story. And that really kind of just motivated me to start doing work that says something. And the first the only time I was juried into Visions was a couple of years ago, a piece about gun violence. And Deborah Fell's husband came up to me at the opening and said, I really loved your work because it says something. And that has really stayed with me. That is like, that's what I want to make now. I want to make work that says something. And, I mean, I've had people say, oh, you're too out, you're too forthright with what you're saying. I don't care, I mean, I'm at the point in my life that I don't care anymore if people like what I have to say. If they don't like it, they don't have to look at it. And the other thing is, if you look at art in museums, a lot of it is controversial. So, if I can get somebody to start thinking and, consider their own story, then I've accomplished something. The other feedback I've gotten is, you'll never sell this work. And that's not why I'm making it. I'm making it because I have a voice and I have something to say. I also wanted to say, which I didn't say earlier, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my work. It's a great honor to be in the show. It's my second time in. My first time was also with Natalya. So, it's a great feeling.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm really happy to be doing this and having you. And I do think it's important that we have difficult conversations about powerful art and art that means something, as you put it. And I'm curious, your choices in the piece, for example, the number of names that you used, that is a powerful visual representation of the loss of lives. And then could you tell us about the raindrop or leaf or teardrop motif that you've used on that piece? And go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to have some graphic on it that kind of pulled it all together. I didn't really know what shape it was going to take, when I printed because I printed it on my wide format printer. So it was 16-inch wide cloth. And I didn't really know, what layout to do. At first I did a big square and it just didn't move me. So then I thought, well, it's really a list of names. So why not make it a long, narrow piece like a list? And then I wanted something to just kind of give it a pow factor. So they're teardrop shapes. And I consulted with an Instagram friend in Holland who is an exquisite hand stitcher. And I talked to her about making teardrop shapes and, what would be most effective and blah, blah, blah. And then I played around a lot on scraps of organza. And I had this, I buy a lot of variegated pearl cotton from Laura Wazalowski. I think that's how you say her name. Anyway, and so I actually had in my thread statch, I had a couple skeins of variegated black, brown, and gray. And I thought, perfect. So that's what I did the teardrops in. And just kind of randomly, I think I had stitched it like a basting line of where I kind of wanted them to go, and then just randomly stitched them in there.
And I'm curious about your choice to make the names difficult to read or illegible.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is kind of like a privacy issue. I've done one memory quilt for the Social Justice Sewing Academy, and there was a lot of emphasis about this needed to be, it's a private personal story, and, don't put it on your social media and things like that. So I think that was part of it. It was just kind of out of, having, acknowledging these people who were killed by police, but at the same time allowing some privacy, So I think that was it. It was about more about calling attention to the numbers than, than saying exactly each person's name. And, this spreadsheet, I mean, it was huge, and it had each person's name, their nationality, and how they were killed, and then a link to the news story about it. And I mean, I got to a point I couldn't read too many of them. And that's another thing that makes me a little crazy. People say, like George Floyd, well, he was high on fentanyl. Well, you know, a lot of the people that are killed in police encounters were not doing good things. But, you know, who are we to judge that? You know, I mean, who, you know, why is it justified to take somebody's life because they're high on drugs? You know, I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. And I'm finding, interestingly enough, I'm not I wouldn't say I'm a religious person. I'm definitely a spiritual person, but I was raised in the Protestant church, and I'm finding that this is coming back to me now in some of my work. My two latest pieces about hypocrisy are about, you know, a lot of these people that are being committed, have committed crimes, are saying, you know, well, you know, Jesus told me to do it or whatever. And I'm like, really? You know, that's not what I learned in Sunday school. And so I'm finding that is coming back to me in my work too.
Well, I'm interested to see where that comes through with your art in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm also, you know, I've taken this class along with Natalya, the plastic pollution class. And I mean, what really awoke me to plastic pollution was connecting with Amy Meisner in Alaska about 3 years ago. And they have spent their kids' childhood on the weekends picking up trash on the beaches in Alaska. And their kids are now teenagers, and they've done this since they were little kids. And so that really made me aware of my own plastic consumption. And I stopped buying bottled water, you know, which, you know, if you think about it, most bottled water is water that we would drink out of the faucet, you know, only a company's making money off of it. And so I changed my own habits. So I'm thinking more about making art from plastic, but not wanting to subject myself to too many toxin chemicals and all that. So I have a lot of ideas.
Well, Natalya, let's hear a little bit more from you about your projects. How, I guess my question is, we make art and we want people to respond to it and enjoy it and think about what we're trying to say. But when you're using single-use plastic, you're also taking that out of the environment. Well, not taking it out of the environment, I shouldn't say that, but taking it out of the landfill where it's just going to sit for the next 500 plus years. How do you see this existing once you take down your large installation? What do you do with, I mean, yeah, just how do you handle the single-use plastic as it exists into art moving forward?
Well, first of all, I don't take it out of the landfill. I collect the plastic that comes into my house, which even though I no longer buy plastic water bottles either, or things like that, and the plastic shopping bags have been outlawed in New York State, there's still a gajillion amounts of plastic that come into my own home. And I use that for my art. Like you said, the plastic lasts for a very long time. It's going to outlast all of us. I think the numbers differ as to what kind of plastic lasts how long, but the plastic shopping bag and the plastic packaging, you know, that's wrapped around the paper towels you buy at the supermarket is all, you know, it's going to last 100 years or more. So I don't worry about the longevity of the artwork that I make that is meant for inside spaces. It's, you know, as long as, like any other artwork, it's not put into direct sunlight, it will outlast us all. The artwork that I create that's for the outdoors, when I've made gigantic fire escapes before that hung outside, but all of those were made out of clear plastic. So I wasn't worried about color lasting. And I have to say they held up pretty well. You know, 3 months outside or so, just get a little grimy. That's about it. They hold up well. The color plastic that I put outside, I've recently started, when I've been working with schools and they want artwork to last in their windows, and it usually does go in the windows. I use a sealant that's made for plastic and all sorts of materials. It's like, I have it somewhere here. It's made for boats. It's made for things that go on sailboats. And it works quite well. So I am actually not using it on all these flowers because that would just be too time consuming. And I am concerned about the chemicals in that sealant as well. But it lasts really long, even outside. I've put things out there and it lasts forever. So I don't worry about the longevity of it. If it gets a little grimy, that's okay. The birds that I created last year, I was invited to do a window display in a gallery that shows my work. So they had an afterlife. The fire escapes that I've created in the past, I repurposed them for another installation, and like a quilt, it rolls up and it goes to storage pretty easily. I don't know what's going to happen with these flowers yet. This is their first iteration, but I would certainly be perfectly happy to exhibit them again in a different configuration somewhere else, and perhaps even crowdsource more flowers and make something really amazingly huge with the help of people all over the world. So I don't know, I'm open.
Great. And your fire escape that you said rolls up, it's a soft sculpture?
Yeah, so it's basically like a gigantic quilt. It was 17 feet by 17 feet. Well, it's in the other room. It's rolled up like a quilt, but folded and rolled up. So once they're in storage, they don't take up that much space.
Wow.
You should mention my scarf, which is your fire escape.
It's not plastic though.
No, but I mean, it is the fire escape.
Yes. Yeah, I enjoy designing fabrics in Photoshop that start with my own photographs, and then I print them and I make scarves and shawls out of them. And Carol was kind enough to purchase one a few years ago.
It's, the least I can do is buy art from other artists, right?
Very beautiful.
This is one of my favorites. I mean, it goes with everything.
Thank you.
It is beautiful. Naomi,
so
oh, sorry, go ahead, Jane.
It's just beautiful, and it's lovely that we're all so creative and we can get through this COVID being creative and using our talents. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a gift.
Yeah. Naomi, I was curious about the blood knot motif. Does that show up in other artworks, or was this a part of the series? That certain motif, is that a part of the series that you said you've kind of come to a closure with?
It is. Each piece was a different iteration about relationships, but I made several pieces based on knot diagrams. Another one was more lyrical in shape, and it had a lot of colors in it. And then I also have other pieces that were based on this idea of masks and the masks we put up. And so they're based on some abstractions of some masks that were used for protection and spiritual guidance in wars. And so I think I'm always thinking about relationships and barriers we put up and what we let down and what we show in certain situations, because I feel like in my 40s, that's what I'm always navigating, right? Is relationships and, new relationships. And every semester I have brand new students, and thinking about those things and what do we share and how much do we let people in and how that helps us or hurts us. I think that's always on my mind.
Yeah. I was just thinking about batting while you're talking about that, because that's the material you're using. And, you're hiding. I mean, you've thought all through this, you're hiding it, but it's also what keeps you warm. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Typically it only shows if, once the quilt has so much wear, right? And then we try to patch it and cover it up and get that batting back in there. And so to expose the batting is as a little vulnerable and talking about what it means to be vulnerable and set yourself up for pain and relationships where, our loved ones get sick and pass away and, all the things that happen in our lives. So I think that's what I'm always thinking about.
Wow. So we have about 15 minutes left. Do the four of you have questions for each other?
I always have questions. uh, but I would like to say something to Carol. I would encourage you to keep making the work you're making. I think that the things you're saying are incredibly powerful. And so those naysayers that want you to make something that's just pretty, like, just let them just go to the
Yeah,
wayside.
And I'm married to one of them. Anyway.
Oh, that's hard, but please continue. I think that,
Don't mind.
everybody, even if you're making work that's legitimately, sometimes my work is not overtly political, but I think that saying something that's important to you, I think other people really resonate with that. So thank you for making that work.
Thank you. Well, I agree, because I think if your heart is really in it, it shows, so.
I think I'm going to start putting plastic in my work now as well as paper.
Yay!
Good idea.
I actually made 3 quilts about plastic in the ocean about a couple years ago. And I store them in the basement because I just don't, if they're off gassing, I don't want them in my studio. But I've submitted them to 5 or 6 exhibits. They've never gotten into anything. And it's just sort of an interesting thing to me. So it tells me that if I do more work with plastic, I need to, go a different direction with it. So.
Natalya, do you
Try
want
and
to?
make it not look like plastic. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Take the look of plastic off it.
Well,
Jane, you seem to be really
a quote I love is from Amy's daughter, who I think was 11 when she said this, is why make trash people don't want, why take trash people don't want and make trash people don't want. So, it's really something to think about,
Yeah.
out of the mouths of babes.
Definitely. Jane, I think you're very talented at turning something into something else, right? The transformation. Like, I think that your piece requires a lot of looking at it, trying to figure out, how it got there, all those beautiful textures and colors and patterns. Like, I think you must be a master at transformation.
Well, it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? Putting pieces together and making them look like something else.
Yeah.
The challenge.
Natalya, I'd love to hear about your commissioned house portraits briefly. Like, how did it start? And yeah.
How did it start? It started so long ago. I get, one of the things that I enjoy, sorry, my dog is expecting to be petted here. One of the things that I really, hello. You want to say hi? One of the things that I always enjoy is the challenge of creating something out of nothing, or something out of unusual. And I started, okay. I think I did it as a gift for a friend, a few gifts for friends. I wanted to experiment with what it would look like if they sent me something from their homes to make into a portrait of their home. And it kind of started from there. And then I started doing them as commissioned pieces. I'm working on one here right now. It's this piece, actually, most people send me something from their home. This woman asked me to use my own materials. She just sent me photographs of her home, and she said, she loves cumulus clouds and the magnolia tree in her front yard. She wanted that represented. And she sent me some words from a poem that I still haven't incorporated it. So I dug into my own stash for this, and I found some vintage linens and the dryer sheets for the sky, painted dryer sheets for the sky. So I'm embroidering the magnolia blossoms right now. Yeah, it's, something people enjoy creating. I've had people who sent me, oh gosh, I had one set of 3 sisters did it as a 50th anniversary wedding gift for their parents. And they sent me a box this big of postcards, maps of their hometown. They emailed me gajillion images of their parents from their wedding and the years together. And I had to winnow that down into only so much how I can fit into a 12 by 12 square. But it's a fun challenge. I always enjoy figuring out how to collage all those items together, what to stitch by machine, what to stitch by hand. It's a challenge I really enjoy.
Yeah, they're quite beautiful, and it's almost having done some work like that, it's almost like a collaboration.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like, you know, you start with like something that's given to you, and I really find that to be inspiring because I love rules as an artist. Like I give myself rules all the time, right? I need constraints, I need rules, I need some place to be creative in this area. And so I think that that's a really interesting way to go about it, and they're quite lovely.
Thank you.
But they give you all the fabric and the medium, and you just have to put it together in some amazing way.
Well, and some of them do. Some do give me. It's most.
But
Some
it's
some of it.
more helpful when they do, isn't it? In a way?
Um,
No,
no,
it's
it's
like a
different.
puzzle again.
It's a different type of a puzzle each time. Whether they give me the fabrics or the papers representing their home, or whether they just give me a ton of photographs and information. Either way, it's a different type of a puzzle.
So it's always different.
Yeah.
Jane, I'm curious, when you're working on your daily sketchbook collages, do you have limitations to what you include? Are you trying to work out of one stack of pages from a certain magazine, or?
Oh, I get magazines, or people give me magazines. And I've got so many magazines, I don't know what to do with them. I keep going through them and then putting them on the bottom and then going through the top ones again, you know, staggering them. But you wouldn't want to see my desk here because it's covered. I'm a very messy worker, and I'm just covered in bits and pieces, and I get up from my chair and it hangs from me, and I go into the kitchen and there's bits hanging off me, and it's in my bed, and it's in the bathroom, and it's bits everywhere. They get stuck to you, you know, and it used to be thread and fabric, and now it's pieces of paper. Crazy.
Our birds, we find them in our birds' nests in our neighborhood. Like I have dyed batting that'll end up on my shoe, and threads go outside, and I take the dog in and out all the time, and we see them in birds' nests. So they're using them.
I love
Oh, isn't that lovely? The thought of that.
Oh, that reminds me of a participant question that we got asking Natalya if you use if your threads have shown up in your artwork, your stash of loose threads.
They do occasionally, and I don't have any to show, but yeah, it's great texture. So yeah, I sometimes use certain colors, sometimes all the colors, and I stitch over that, layer fabric sometimes, layer plastic sometimes.
Your cards, you could use them there.
Yes.
I love the vision walls that both Jane and Natalya have. I had one on the door that has the table where my sewing machine is that I added to for years and years. And last year I was cleaning out my studio, and I don't know why I took it down. So the only thing up there now, well, it's interesting because there's all this, both my office and my studio have southern exposure windows. So there's all this resist on the door of where all the different papers were, where the sun had, bleached it out. And the only thing on there now is my Quilt National 17 poster. But now I look at it, it looks so bare. But I have done collaging in art books or journals for years, but I've never done anything with it. Occasionally, I sent Jane a private message about this, and occasionally I look at them and they're kind of like a timeline of my life. But, interesting idea about using that as art inspiration.
Well, sometimes I look back at my journals and see things which subconsciously I haven't realized. There's meaning in there, and you don't even realize until you look back at them. It's crazy, spooky.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great inspiration.
Yeah, very good.
I start a new sketchbook every year. So this is mine for this year that I
Wow.
make myself with all my vintage papers and everything. And that's what I look at like every week, right? Like you flip back through it, see where I'm going. And when I get stuck on something, I go to a previous year. I would save
Look
them. in the
back.
binder. That's what I would run down to grab is all the sketchbooks because I put it
Do
down.
you date it too? Do you date the top of it as well?
I do.
Yeah.
Yep. This one is for 2021. My mom marbled this beautiful paper for me.
Oh.
I dated and I keep notes and lists and my vision wall is in here, right? I keep it in a book, but I keep looking at it all the time. I think that's important.
I'm always in awe of people who have the discipline to do that. I think the only thing I do on a regular basis is I take my calcium every morning.
Well, it's the same
don't
as
do-
taking
I
a
don't do
pill. It's the
anything
same.
every single day, except
You take the
go to the
pill
bathroom and
and do
take
your
calcium.
journal.
Wow. I really am feeling inspired by all of you and how you're taking just the simple craft of daily practices and making something bigger out of it and being very thoughtful or not maybe just doing things to be creative and to get it out. And I don't know. I think I'm going to take that away with me today and maybe start on something small and hopefully get it to last more than a day or 2 or 3.
Good.
Well, you know, when I get stuck, which fortunately has not been lately, but when I get stuck, I just go in my studio and the bottom drawer of the IKEA cabinet is just scraps. And I just start sewing scraps together. And I'm trying to think, I guess it was the Defining Moments series. I did like a business plan. This was a series that Marion and I did together. About, she grew up in the Jim Crow South and I grew up in white privilege in San Francisco Bay Area suburb. So it was about the contrasts of our upbringing, how it defined the people that we are today or that she was. And so I had all these ideas and I had written down them, but I couldn't get started. So I just went in and started sewing together scraps. And I did like 4 or 5, 11-foot strips of fabric and just pinned them up on my design wall. And that got my engine going. And then I was able to start.
This way.
Yeah.
Sometimes cleaning the studio is also a good way to get started.
Yeah.
You find things you didn't know you had.
Exactly.
I can relate to that. Well, Jane, before we go, I think you're the last person who hasn't, if you have a website, could you type it into the chat box for the participants?
I don't know how to do that. How do you
If
do
you
that?
tell me, I can type it in.
It's Jane Lloyd, textiles.co.uk.
Okay. Hopefully I spelled it correctly. Okay.
Yeah, that's grand.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's been such a lovely way to start my weekend and morning. I'm gonna go get my antibiotics.
Get better soon.
Yeah, thank you. This really was a great conversation. I appreciate the 4 of you taking your time to be with us today. The registration for the following Fridays will open this afternoon, and we have a special event happening on Thursday, the August 19th, and also at the same time on August 20th, because we'll be talking with artists in New Zealand and Australia on the evening of August 19th Eastern time. So I hope you all will register for that, and you can find it all on the same place at dairybarn.org. Thank you to eQuilter for sponsoring today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
for having
you.
us
Thank
here.
you. It's been lovely.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Bye.